think that's still the case, right? That doesn't change in a workers' co-op. You still have people who are giving advice, people who say, hey, maybe that's not the right idea. I think the difference is it has, in my mind, a higher chance of surviving long-term and also being a better like company to work for everyone who's making the thing turn.
So what happens if people leave? What happens to their equity?
They sell back.
At what price? At a price that who assigns?
The price, the value of the company at the time.
Yeah, who buys it though? Does that mean that every single person in the company then has to fork over money for every time somebody wants to leave? Or when you hire a new employee, do they have to buy into the company? They must have to, right? I guess if you wanted to be really technical about it, you could slowly over time allot shares and just reduce their pay as they slowly pay for it. Maybe.
Who decides that though?
The value of the company?
Yeah, it could be an arbitrary number.
I mean, you'll make it up. You get it appraised like you would any other company, right?
It sounds like a hassle.
Get appraised like you would any other company. I think appraising companies when they're not publicly traded is actually quite difficult. No, there's a lot of different formula that people might rely on, 7x revenue or some multiplier of assets and whatever, or employee. Like there's like I've seen a ton of ways to get value, but the idea that doing that is easy or simple on the fly. This is about ownership, not salary. Yeah, but if you go to work for a co-op, you have to buy into the ownership. If you work for a company and you're going to give some of that ownership to a new employee, they need to pay you for it. You're not going to give that away for free.
Every time an employee leaves, that they get it appraised. What if they disagree with the appraiser?
I think there's minor problems that people like to poke holes in for a workers' co-op, but most of them are pretty tried and true. And it's not like it's a...
I don't think that's true at all. I don't know if there are, at least in America, I don't know if there are any successful large-scale co-ops. Maybe smaller ones, like if you count like a startup. Like a lot of tech startups are kind of like that, I guess. Whether you're like paying everybody in equity or something, maybe, I don't know.
New thing, right? There are 3,000 employed companies that are workers' co-ops that have solved.
I would be so curious to hear about these. Like Mondragon, I don't even think they work in the same structure that people think for co-ops.
So it's not.
But for a smaller company, let's say Joe leaves and Joe says, my portion is valued at $200,000, let's just say. And the company is valued at that. But giving that person $200,000 would take money out of the company and hurt the company by this person leaving and you having to pay them out. Because that's money now coming out of the business.
Sure.
So I see that as a slight issue. Like a lot of these companies are completely illiquid. Like smaller companies, they don't have liquidity. It's you lock in and that.
Well, careful. The money wouldn't, oh, hold on. How would this work? The money wouldn't be coming from the business, right? The money would be coming from other owners who are increasing their equity in the business. If two people owned a business that was worth $1 million and one person wanted to leave, so the first person had to pay out that guy and pay him $500,000, the money wouldn't necessarily come from the business, right? The money would come from the individual who's buying out the equity stake in the company from the other guy. The money wouldn't technically be coming from the business, it'd be coming from the other owners, right?
That valuation is there until you go public.
There are grocery stores that are employee owned, but who knows the back end? Yeah, but that's different. These are huge companies with tens of thousands of shares. And don't they just basically give you a few shares and you're like, oh, employee owned, right? And like,
a lot of these companies are completely illiquid. Like smaller companies, they don't have liquidity. It's you lock in, and that valuation is there until you go public. And then there's a cash out.
I'm not so fearful of the ghost arguments that don't exist. You know, like
I think that. Well, I mean, the chance.
Oh, I know these guys. I DM these guys, and I feel so bad that I mixed their names up because I'm trying to ask. I'm so curious how much Graham knows about like formal like business structures or finance versus just like running a small business. I'm not trying to say he has no knowledge or he's an idiot or whatever. I'm just curious about because. Ludwig saying that these are like ghost arguments or they're not like a concern. These would actually be the primary issues. Like imagine you've got a co-op with 10 people and you want to hire new employees. That's a really big deal, right? Hiring employees is a really big deal. We can walk through some examples here. We'll just do a 4-person co-op, okay? Let's say that you've got 4 people. All of these people are 25% owner. All these people are 25% owners, okay? They all have a 25%, 1/4 the company. Let's say that you have a business that's worth $1 million, okay? Well, if you want to hire another person, now we're gonna simplify this and say that, okay, so let's say that I've got a company, it's worth $1 million. Let's say 25% here, okay? 25% equity on each of these owners. Let's say that we think that this company can go big, okay? This company can go big. This company can be worth $10 million. But now let's say we're having a debate on whether or not we should hire another employee to help it go big. Well, a lot of weird things now are gonna happen in hiring this employee. So here's a couple things. If we hire this employee, okay, all of us are losing our equity by 5%. So now this guy is gonna be brought in and he's gonna have, 20% equity. So now we brought in this guy who's now going to have 20% equity. In order for this guy to join our company, he's going to have to pay us $200,000, right? Because if I've got 25% equity in $1 million company, well, if he's going to buy out 5% of each of our equity, each of us are going to have to get paid out $50,000. So he's going to have to pay $200,000 to join the company if he wants to buy out our stakes. And now, if this company does manage to explode in valuation, right, and now the company's worth $10 million, well, now I have a 20% share of this $10 million company, which is $2 million. Whereas before, if I disagreed and it could have grown anyways, I would have had $2.5 million. Now I've lost out on $500,000 of equity because I let this employee buy in for as a co-op, right? What I'm describing right here, this is like a very, very, very basic structure, very basic example for a co-op. People will act like these are fringe examples, but no, this would be this is just how co-ops in these like very theoretical forms would work. I don't know how you address problems like this. Like, let's say these two guys are like, wait, hold on, I don't want to hire another dude and get my equity up. We can just work harder. This is bullshit, right? Is this how co-ops usually work? I think co-ops actually work. They use like way more sophisticated or complicated or obfuscated payment schemes, and it ends up being a lot different. But yeah, I don't know. I don't actually know how you would solve for this. I'm not sure. Does everyone necessarily have to maintain equal ownership in the entity? You don't have to, but then you're getting into other weird questions. So for instance, let's say that you don't have equal ownership. Let's say that instead we all maintain our 25% equity and then this guy comes in at 4%, right? Okay, well that's fine. He can come in at 4% equity and now at least all of us have 24% equity. But when we go to vote on things, this guy doesn't get the same voting power. No, we have 6 times the voting power because all of us have 24% equity. This motherfucker has 4% equity. He's not going to get the same vote as me. Why the should some guy that has a smaller controlling share of the company and less at risk because if the company gets he's risking a lot less money than us, right? So now everybody can't have the same vote. So if you want to bring people in at different equity shares, which is most likely what would happen, not everybody's going to have the exact same cut of equity. Well, now you can't give everybody one vote because if I have 99% equity of a company, I've got 100 employees at 1% equity altogether, you're not going to get the same vote as me. I've got way more to lose, right? So I don't know how this would ever work. I'm not sure. I've never heard good answers to any of this before.
Companies, they don't have liquidity. It's you lock in and that valuation is there.
I love when Destiny talks out of his Bry A, go. What did I just say that was wrong? Bry A in YouTube chat. Let's go. Anyway,
until you go public.
And
then there's a cash out.
Arguments that don't exist, you know, like
I think that well, I mean, the chance of all the employees staying with you the entire time.
He should have, as soon as Ludwig, like that was a pretty aggressive thing. Ghost argument. This isn't a real thing. Graham should have went really hard here. Oh, how are you going to hire new employees? That's a super basic thing. How are you going to hire new employees? How are employees going to leave the company? 2 very, very, very basic questions. When you're working, especially in like the tech podcaster world where you don't have a concrete product or even software, valuations of companies are really hard. It's very, very, very difficult. Like for instance, let's say I wanted to sell my company, the Destiny brand, to somebody. How the f would you value that? Well, I would have to stay on. You'd retain me for at least 2 years, if not longer, because how the f you make my brand work without me, right? How do you value an ownership? Do you go by all of my revenue? Does it include like all the sponsorships and everything, even though I can do those or not do those? Are you going to have like, it's a really complicated question. If you wanted to buy a podcast, how would you value that? Would you just look at revenue from advertising deals? Like, it's a really, 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 really complicated thing to do. So the idea that like, oh, well, it's so trivial to just, if somebody wants to leave or join, well, we just appraise the company and then buy them out or, you know, have them, like, that's a pretty challenging thing to do.
thing that comes up and it's not a problem. It's just something that happens.
Well, if you want it done right, it's hard. Can definitely get a rough number relatively easily unless the business is dependent on a single person. Well, can't tax on, sure. But like if people are buying in or leaving and there's a lot of people with different equity at stake, I think you would want to be really sure on the number. I don't think I would want like a rough number in like this kind of startup-y podcast world. I want to make sure I'm getting paid out correctly. I don't want some bullshit estimate. Yeah.
I appreciate that, Destiny.
All right, bye.
Remember to hit that like and subscribe, and don't forget the notification bell so that my videos show up right in your feed.